Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Well, good evening again to everyone. Welcome to our discussion of Discipleship by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. We are still in chapter 6. And we'll begin with a little bit of a review, starting back on page 92. I believe we had made it over to 93, but on 92, to kind of reintroduce us to this portion of the Sermon on the Mount, a portion of Matthew 5 that is entitled Kindred, or the subheading in Bonhoeffer's mind, looking at Matthew 5:21 through 26. Um, I don't know if there are any questions or comments, anything that has risen since our last time together. Um, and of course, if not, we will, always entertain any questions or thoughts as we move along. Excuse me. But on page 92, um, this is, talking about the portion of Matthew 5 where talking about the relationship between people and when there's conflict, and how forgiveness and reconciliation outweigh sacrifice, outweigh worship. So, Jesus says, if you're on your way to give your gift at the altar and you realize that someone, sister or brother, uh, is offended by you or has um, something negative to say, has been hurt by you, um, or has something against you in the text, then you're to leave your gift there before the altar and first be reconciled, then come back and offer your gift. Um, and so, there's something about being in a community of Jesus that makes it of the utmost importance that I'm in a right relationship with the other people around me. That again, that supersedes even my worship, even following the dictates of the law to take my offering and present it to God. If someone I know has taken offense at something or perceives some injury um, that I have caused them, then even before I go to worship, I go and make amends, go and reconcile with that person. So Jesus's community. Now he's taking this, obviously, and extrapolating to his contemporary situation. And so he says, Jesus's community today ought to examine whether, at the moment it enters God's presence for prayer and worship, many accusing voices rise up between it and God and hinders its prayers. Jesus' community ought to examine whether it has given a sign of Jesus' love, which preserves, supports, and protects lives to those whom the world has despised and dishonored. Otherwise, the most correct form of worship, the most pious prayer, and the bravest confession will not help, but will give witness against it because it has ceased following Jesus. So he's challenging the worship communities of his day to examine themselves to see, okay, when we get together for worship, are there people in our society, in our community, that look at us and have something against us, and of course in Bonhoeffer's context, has the church, you know, been co-opted by society? Has the church, the Lutheran Church, and in Bonhoeffer's uh, particular understanding or particular thought, have has the church, cozied up so close um, with the Nazi regime that now, people that are persecuted by the Nazis, Jews and others that were seen as expendable. Um, will they Are they looking at the church and taking offense at what the church is doing? And then Bonhoeffer is saying that if that's the case, then the most sublime worship, the most righteous application of the law, the most pious prayer, courageous confession, as he says, falls short because um, for Jesus, the relationship is key. And for followers of Jesus, being in right relationship with others is of the greatest importance. And so he goes on at the top of page 93 to say, God does not want to be honored if a sister or brother is dishonored. So, now Bonhoeffer again, I think here is talking more on an institutional level, on a denominational level, on the fact that the leadership of the church, of the Lutheran Church, had decided that okay, well, we're not going to condemn what the Nazis are doing. We could preserve our place, maybe even, have some safety against persecution because by not forcefully or really not condemning what the Third Reich is doing. And so, since the church decided to do that, now that has tainted and diminished their worship. And so you can think about it, along history in different denominations, and in many that still do, where there are particular parts of society, particular ethnic, racial groups. Um, particular genders, all of the things where a church has made a decision, like Southern Baptist Convention recently to um, reaffirm their stance that women shouldn't be in pastoral leadership or shouldn't preach. Um, so you have this still going on, and in Bonhoeffer's estimation, if there are people in the society that when they look at you in your community and take offense at what you're saying, take offense at the persecution of people in certain groups of society that take offense at the fact that you're not speaking out against injustice or that you are perpetuating injustice, then again, for Bonhoeffer, God doesn't want to be honored by communities that do that because that community is dishonoring its sister or brother. Um, and therefore it's incumbent upon uh, Christian institutions to pay attention to what their message is, to pay attention to, does their message line up with this strict discipleship of following Jesus? And does it try to now still claim, that certain people aren't allowed in? Or does it still proclaim that, that the message of the gospel really isn't free and open to all? Access to God really is, not really free and open to all. You have to do these certain things in order to be worthy. Um, and so, Bonhoeffer is making the point that it's really important that the church not do that, not just simply for appearance's sake, but also because it wounds the heart of God, and God doesn't take kindly to being honored by those that are still hurting others. Um, and and so so God in the plan of salvation did not separate from the Son, did not distance himself from the persecution and ultimately the death of Jesus, but stayed connected. And so, um, you know, likewise will not be separated from those whose humanity the Son assumed as an equal, and for whose sake the Son bore um, the humiliation. So if Jesus died for all, which is our contention and our belief, then Jesus died for all. There's no questions. It's Jesus died for everyone, for all, and therefore all are to be respected, nurtured, and protected. Because the Son of Man became a human being, service to God in worship can no longer be detached from service to sisters and brothers. Those who say they love God and yet hate their brothers and sisters are liars. And James talks about that in his epistle. The epistle that bears his name. If you say you love God, but you hate your sister or brother, if you love God who you haven't seen but hate your sibling who you do see, then your worship is not right and your faith is null. And so, this really kind of puts a fine point on that. Um, and so this reconciliation piece is the only way to right worship. Um, but it includes humiliation and dishonor for the disciples themselves, because now you're going to a person or to people who have taken issue with offense at what you have done, and you're trying to be reconciled, and that doesn't always go real well. um, they might not be completely accepting of your apologies or your desire to reconcile because they don't trust you. They've heard, for however long, the things that you said against them, the questioning that you've had about, are they worthy of God's love? These sorts of things that happen. So now to take seriously this call to reconciliation does open the disciples, does open us up to humiliation and dishonor. Um, but also we realize that, as Jesus said, when you do it to the least of me of these, you do it to me. So when we're serving the least of these, we're also serving Christ, and then Christ and those to whom we go to serve become one. Um, and so, even though this is a pretty stark judgment on believers and on the church of Bonhoeffer's time, he ends this section with, but there still is time. There still is time to reconcile. There still is time to make things right. Um, and so, part of our work, um, and we understand this in our modern era, even, post World War II, that we, in our helping to, in in us helping others to attain their rights, we are affecting and exacting that reconciliation that God desires. So when we advocate on behalf of immigrants, when we have advocate on behalf of immigrants from a certain place or immigrants in general, when we um, advocate on behalf of those whose rights are tenuous or at risk of being taken away. Um, we're we're practicing the grace that God has for us, and we're affecting um, that reconciliation that God intends. Again, this is not simply for our interpersonal relationships, but this is for, our religious, our denominational interactions that really do seek to serve the needs of others, and that knowing that when we are working on behalf of others to help them gain their rights or protect their themselves and their families, we're also doing the same for Christ. Um, you
I
know,
have a question.
sure.
Is this something like when Jesus said, "He who is without sin cast the first stone"?
Mm,
when it comes to if you're worshiping, if you begin to worship and then you remember that you have sinned.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure if that's in
It's
quite
not
the same vein,
exactly, but
but but it does have a
it's something
similar,
along that line.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it does have a similar, all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God, and like the Apostle Paul would say. And so it's there is a real importance on that reconciliation, on that forgiveness. Um, and not to be overly
Judgmental.
concerned with judging, other people for what they have or haven't done. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess,
It's
you
a
know,
long way, but it's something along that line.
yeah. 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 It's definitely connected. True. 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 Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because, I
Because
mean, it's
Jesus never said the person was guilty or not
mm,
guilty.
right.
When all of the folks
Right.
walked away,
Mm-hmm.
he just said to the person, do not sin anymore.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
So he didn't pass judgment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. Well, didn't pass judgment in terms of condemning or punishing.
Exactly.
Right. Yep. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it says content for others.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there's still malice that's being held for someone.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
It's
mean,
a
because I
long
think
shot, but it's similar.
say again.
I said it's a long shot, but it's in the same kind of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is in the same realm for sure. Yeah. 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 Hmm. It's you you know it it's almost like how I think we talked about this last week, how in our liturgy the peace comes before communion. So after, we've confessed our faith, professed our faith, affirmed our faith in the creed, and then we pray together the prayers of the people, and then we confess our sins, we're absolved, and then we pass the peace. And pardon the pun, but that piece um, is analogous to what Jesus is saying here. That's the time we're on our way to the altar, quote unquote. We're getting ready to go and receive, but now we need to be at peace with one another. And so if we know that somebody has taken offense at us, then we should be going to that person. If and of course it's ritualized in context of worship, but it's that same kind of understanding that that we've been absolved of sin, reminded of our absolution after confessing our sins corporately, and now we need to make the same move toward one another in terms of forgiveness and reconciliation. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Brereton, where do you? I thought I saw you unmuted.
Yes, I did. Wait a minute.
Hmm. No. Okay. Um, right. So, so at the end of this section, um, Bonhoeffer does talk about the service to sisters and brothers, which satisfies them and respects their rights in life, is the path of self-denial, the path to the cross. And then no greater love has one than those who lay down their lives for their friends. And this is, the model of Jesus, the action of Jesus, the example that Jesus shows. And so, so as he brings this piece to an end, he's really again focusing back on the cross, on the self-denial that is required of those who would follow Jesus. But it's not self-denial just for self-denial's sake. It's self-denial for the sake of another, for the sake of making space for the other, of reconciling with the other, that we deny ourselves of various things in order to make that space and make that effort. Okay. Um, so if we move along, um, we have the section now here in the middle of 94 that's entitled Woman. And and this looks at verses 27 through 32 of Matthew 5. And as you can see, if you haven't read already, just as a quick perusal, this is the part that talks about, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. And it is also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of infidelity, causes her to commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Um, and so Bonhoeffer now, continuing to follow along in chapter 5 comes to this piece. And so the first part, excuse me, at the top of 95, really talks about the lust that disconnects us from discipleship. That and really this is um, as Bonhoeffer kind of talks about it, it's a sense of idolatry. It's that sense that something or someone else takes our focus off of Christ. Um, and that this action really consigns us or separates us from God, from Jesus, which is it's essentially is hell. That separation from God, sends us into hell or into a hell-like existence, so to speak. Um, and he says, which is something that's kind of curious. It takes a little bit of explaining. That the lack of faith is what makes lust impure. So I don't know if he's saying there can be faithful lust, and that's obviously not what I'm saying would be facetious, but what he is saying is that the lust, removes our dependence on God, and so the faith that we should have in God to satisfy all of our needs now is taken by whatever the object, the person, whatever is is the object of our lust. Um, and goes on to say that if the eye and the hand serve lust and hinder the whole body from the purity of discipleship, then they, rather than Jesus Christ, should be sacrificed. So, so he's saying that again, reiterating the point that God is all in all, that Jesus is our primary focus and our one true desire. And so, if anything takes that focus, if anything replaces that desire, then it's a separation of us from that being, that individual in the person of Jesus Christ, that intends to be everything for us. Um, and so it's that important, such that if you find yourself being pulled away by something that your hand wants to grasp and hold on to and take, or something your eye can't stop looking at, then your focus again is not on Jesus, and then that's a lack of faith, That's the so-called slippery slope that ends up separating you from your Lord and Savior even that much further. Um, and so so Jesus is concerned about this purity of mind and of intention and of body, that all of that is used for the glory of God. And even in his discussion of marriage, um, he says, that marriage uh, is transformed from a selfish, evil thing of desire to a pure mutuality that's born out of love or service to one another. So, so when marriage is seen as, this contract, that there's really no mutuality there, then that is likened to the evil separation from God or from Jesus. Whereas in marriage is entered into and lived with mutuality, um, you know, and when the relationship helps the people in the relationship to focus on God, that they don't get too caught up in focusing on one another, but their focus on God is now sharpened, or they have more accountability because, the relationship partner is asking them about, or reminding them, or even acting in ways that help each of them to focus. Then, that's the purification and the sanctification, and for Bonhoeffer, it liberates marriage from what it had become, as in, when Jesus says, Moses gave you the ability to write a letter of divorce because your hearts were hard, because you weren't in right relationship with your wives, that you didn't see that as a mutuality. Um, and so Jesus says that when there is that understanding that in the relationship, the focus is still on Jesus. In the relationship, you're better able actually to focus on Jesus and on your discipleship. Then that purifies the union, for one, and it also um, gives a clearer understanding of what the point and the purpose of marriage is. Not that it's only about producing children, not that it's simply about one being subservient to the other and the like, but it's really, and not a contractual agreement either. That it's a mutuality that both, as they enter in, and as they answer the call to Jesus, they're helping one another to stay focused on God. And Jesus doesn't make marriage or celibacy required. He doesn't raise one higher than the other. And similar to Paul, Paul says, I wish that all people were like me, i.e., not married, celibate. But even for Paul, he says, but I'm not saying that this is a decree from God. I'm saying this as my opinion. And here Jesus is not raising up either. But as Bonhoeffer says, instead, he frees his disciples from porneia. And that is, infidelity within and outside the marriage. And so, it's increasing and reinforcing the fidelity that is to be there between, yeah, I'll be with you just a second, Ms. Caesar. Between the two, but also their fidelity outside. So it's reinforcing fidelity, broadly speaking, within and with outside of marriage. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I know Bonhoeffer is talking a lot about discipleship, and actually, what I'm gathering is discipleship, in the true sense of the word, is a very difficult thing, and I think he's just giving like a blueprint or instructions how, as human, how we should conduct ourselves and avoid certain pitfalls, because here he says that, well, I think he's referencing Matthew, where it says, if your eye offend you, pluck it out. If your hand offend you, cut it off. So
Hmm.
I don't think that's literal, because there'll be a lot of people going around with, no one hand and eyes or
Hmm.
one eyes. And so, yes, being a follower of Jesus and discipleship, it is a difficult thing. But here we have instructions how to, go about it, and to avoid the pitfalls,
Hmm. Right.
and how to treat our brothers and sisters.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
that's what I'm gathering.
Hmm.
Thank
Right.
you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it really is, and to your point, it really is about, being in right relationship with God and with one another. And whether it's in a marriage relationship or within the community, whether it's, people in the community or even people outside the community, it's still being in this right relationship, that is always focused on Jesus, and that does need reinforcement, by the people around, by the people that are directly in your life, but also the people that are in the wider community, to kind of help to keep each other
You
on
see,
track. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes, ma'am.
is he not suggesting that, but he's not telling us we have to be doing what he's saying.
Hmm. Right.
This is just suggestions whether we accept it or not,
Hmm. Right. Yeah.
because he himself questioned it at his earlier stages before he came to this level.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, your point is well taken. What he's saying is he's putting this out there that if we're going to follow Jesus, if we're going to be disciples, then these are the things that we must do. And I don't think, to your point, I don't think that Bonhoeffer was necessarily saying I have arrived or I've figured this out or I've done this. This entire book is Bonhoeffer wrestling with what is the response to evil in the world. What is the response to what they are experiencing right then, in their midst, with the beginning of World War II, with the injustices that the Nazi regime was already beginning to use against their opponents. And so this really is, I think, for Bonhoeffer, as you mentioned, and for those who were struggling with trying to figure out, well, what do we do in the face of this huge evil? And it's okay. Well, these thinking about this and going toward this kind of headlong and complete focus on Jesus. At least for Bonhoeffer, at least at this point in his development and in his life, this is the most important thing that we can do. Because then that keeps us from veering off to accepting or explaining away the injustices that we see. It guards us against following the establishment, to be in league with, or at least not to vigorously condemn what the regime is doing. Um,
So,
yeah.
so Bonhoeffer would be looking at, would be in favor of people like Gandhi and
Mhm. Oh, yes.
Martin Luther, with
Hmm.
deal with solving the world's problems.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. Very much so. Very much so. Yeah. Very much so. To stand, and as he has said, that's the only way that our work in the world for justice and protection of those that are weaker or targeted by society or by the regime. The only way that we are able to do that in truth is by being committed to Jesus to such an extent that allegiance to Jesus just fills our whole being. Um, and the only way that is sustainable is if the community does it together. If the if because the Lutheran Church wasn't doing it at the time. He was obviously very critical of the Lutheran Church and its stance or non-stance against Nazis. So Bonhoeffer really felt, and ultimately he started the Confessing Church, which kind of took these principles to heart, kind of separated, even though they didn't. I don't think there was any formal separation from the Lutheran Church, but they made a statement, that we do not agree with what the national churches or the established Lutheran Church is doing, vis-a-vis the injustices that we see. And so we're separating ourselves and making the statement. And so this, we are now, part of now the Confessing Church, and these are our how we conduct ourselves in the world, and, condemning the injustice, being fully committed to Jesus, these sorts of things. So yeah. Yeah, so definitely would be very supportive of Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., even some of the freedom fighters, Susulu and Lumumba and others, that really, either we're trying to set up different and new governments and systems, or we're fighting against the corruption of the government of the system they saw. But yeah. Okay. Um, so so now here, oh, I'm sorry. Go
Before
ahead.
you,
You're muted again, Miss Bird.
I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about a state in Matthew 19, I believe it is. I don't know a verse, but when he says a man should leave his mother and father
Hmm.
and cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh.
Hmm.
Now, how do we explain the one flesh
Hmm.
serving God? Do they unite in their Christianity, or how does that happen? Because now, according to Bonhoeffer, to me, as well, I'm not married anymore. But how does a married man or woman put God before his wife
Hmm. Yeah.
or husband?
Right. Well, I mean that was that was Paul's argument. That if you're married, you can't fully follow Christ because your earthly um responsibilities are to your spouse. And so that was his contention, and why he recommended or wished that that people were celibate, so then they could focus solely on Christ. I think Bonhoeffer is really coming down on the side that that within the relationship, there is a certain fidelity that's created that helps both people to now focus on Christ, so that the service to one another, the reconciliation with one another, is part of fulfilling what what your discipleship calls for. Um, and so really the focus, and again, this, you really kind of have to look at this, through Bonhoeffer's whole understanding that when you carry, or when you accept, the call to be a disciple, that Jesus becomes the lens through which you see everything. So now your relationship with the entire world, spouse, friends, workmates, schoolmates, the clerk at the store, bus drivers, whatever, is now mediated through Christ. And so when you are acting for your spouse, for instance, when you are doing the things that you're required to do as a parent, when you're even out in the world, as in whatever your job you're doing, that is mediated through Christ. And so, when your motivation is to do what Christ is asking you to do, the likelihood that Christ is going to ask you not to take care of your spouse or not to be kind to the people that are in front of you, or not to do the kinds of things that build up the community, the likelihood that Jesus is going to tell you not to do that is virtually non-existent. So the married relationship, both people are focused on Christ, and now they see
Mhm.
each other in the lens of their relationship to Christ, rather than what might be assumed that, kind of you see the relationship with the spouse first and then kind of say, okay, Jesus, what do you want me to do? Or when Jesus says, okay, now you need to go and do this, you're like, but wait a minute, what about my spouse? There is a mutuality there. But that also assumes that both people, have answered the call to discipleship. When one hasn't, then, Paul talks a little bit about that. I'm not sure how Bonhoeffer would handle that. But yeah.
Okay, so I can see it where they say you should be evenly yoked.
Right, right.
That's
Yeah,
a follow.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
But
then Bonhoeffer, as a celibate, could not understand. What I'm trying to understand is how can Bonhoeffer, as a celibate, make that statement for
mm-hmm,
it to be wholly true?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think again, Bonhoeffer in this book is really pushing himself and the people that are reading it, and believers that did not like what the Nazis were doing. He's really pushing them to explore, okay, what does it really mean to stand against evil, and how do we stand against the kind of evil we're seeing? um and you can be married and be a disciple, you can be celibate and be a disciple. So it's not really the either or of that. It's just that if you are going to be a disciple, then your focus is on Jesus, and whatever that means. And so earlier on in the book, he says, well, once you answer the call, it's not a foregone conclusion that now you're going to be whisked away and said, okay, now you need to go off and do this. No, you might remain in the capacity that you were always in. You might remain in your married relationship, remain in the job that you do, remain, in the town and doing all the things that you normally did. But when you answer the call to discipleship, now your motivation in that is to be as close to following Jesus as you can. And that, for Bonhoeffer at least, makes a huge difference in how you do what you do. Makes a huge difference in how you see yourself in your relationship to all of the people around you, because now you're seeing it through Christ, and now you're hearing, blessed are the peacemakers, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now you're living into, if you're on your way to the altar and you know that someone has an issue with you, then you leave your gift at the altar and go and be reconciled. You're now living into the fact that, okay, wait a minute, I need to govern what my eyes look at and what my hands reach out to take, because if those things take my focus away from looking at and adoring and following Jesus, then I need to get rid of them, or that it's so serious that I need to make sure that I'm as careful as I can be. All of these things now become, rather than kind of, maybe afterthoughts. Now they become the first thought. They're the constant thought of, okay, well, kind of that, kind of trite phrase now, what would Jesus do? You're living that, okay, what is it that Jesus is needing from me in this moment? How is it that Jesus is needing for me to react to what I see, to the news headlines about what the Nazis are doing now? Um, how am I supposed to respond to, my spouse, my children, my co-workers, and all these things based on following Jesus? And again, for Bonhoeffer, it really is getting people to think really strongly and really intently about what does it mean to be a disciple, and then how can that make a difference in the face of the kind of evil they were seeing?
Paloma, can I just read a few
Hmm.
lines here that Bonhoeffer
Hmm.
is saying?
Sure.
It says, contempt for others makes worship dishonest and deprives it of any divine promise.
Hmm.
Individuals, as well as church communities, who intend to enter God's presence with contemptuous or unreconciled hearts, are playing games with an idol. As long as we withhold service and love from a sister or brother, as long as he or she remains target of our contempt. And he's saying we're playing games with an idol.
Hmm.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah. I mean, because again, he's raising the relationship with the people, or the relationship between the believer, between believers, as the utmost. So if we are um
I thought probably you were saying we're not
actively
following
engaged with
Jesus's
people.
instructions.
Yeah,
We're
but
not fo-
okay, go ahead.
no, sorry, we're not following the tenant of the scriptures. Truly
Hmm.
following the tenant.
Right. Right. But those tenets are lived out in our relationship with people around us. So if we are, and it's not that, we control people's reaction to us, but if we are actively engaged or haven't done the work to be reconciled, then he said, we're playing. We're not really serving God. We're not really looking at God as a living being that has expectations of us. We're looking at an idol that, doesn't interact with us and doesn't really even care what we're doing. We're just we're playing at this. We're saying, "Oh, I believe, and I know Jesus said that, I'm to do this, but, well, I'll do it when I get ready, or when or when it's advantageous for me."
We're
But
not real. We're not real.
yeah, right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
You know,
you.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, sure. And, I mean, and preachers over the years have, always talked about this, and members and critiquers, those that critique the church, whether they're believers or not, about the hypocrisy of Christians, and and how, they say one thing but they do another, all of these sorts of things. And and for Bonhoeffer, and and many those that both within and outside the church have critiqued the church, is, we have to do a better job of bringing our actions into line with our stated beliefs, to bring closer to our lived reality what we profess, what we say we believe, to live it, and if Jesus has said, you have said an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, if your enemy strikes you on one cheek, turn the other. If he forces you to go 1 mile, go two. If he demands your cloak, give your tunic as well. These sorts of things that we kind of say, oh, well, that's nice. But don't ever really, really significantly wrestle with, or don't, actually put to the test to try to do those things. We would say, oh, well, that's too much, or, well, Jesus, must have meant something else by that. Uh, then like I said, when we're not real, we're playing at the beliefs that we say we have. And so again, Bonhoeffer is really trying to push this this understanding, really get people to wrestle with. And again, this was written for men that were training to be pastors. So again, so he's thinking of it at that, he's got these students in the underground seminary they started when he came back after war had been declared. And so he's really, really, really trying to get these folks to really wrestle with, okay, what does it mean to be a disciple? I think I'm called to be a pastor, to be a preacher, to work for the good of the kingdom of God. What does that mean? And especially in a situation where you've got such vile things happening in the name of the German people, and the established church in Germany, the Lutheran Church, has said, okay, well, we're kind of okay with what they're doing, or well, maybe we're not okay, but we're not going to condemn them. And so now Bonhoeffer is really wrestling, and he's really trying to put believers' feet to the fire, or at least the folks that he's writing to in his classes in the seminary, to say, okay, what does this really mean? Are we going to be serious about following what Jesus says, or we can continue, like you said, to not be real, or decide, or to settle for cheap grace? Um, and obviously, his contention is no, we must, work for the costly grace. We must, follow Jesus as closely as we possibly can. We need to abandon all other things and focus on Jesus, and let Jesus be the first, our first thought. And let Jesus be our complete, vision, and let Jesus's example dictate how we will live, not kind of let our example now kind of dictate you know, what we will and won't do with Jesus, or how we interpret what Jesus has said. Um, so again, this is really, Bonhoeffer is wrestling, but he's also wrestling with how to train people that now are going to be sent out into this very, very difficult situation, to fight against the established church, to fight against, this powerful but evil regime, all of these things. And so it's really, for Bonhoeffer, at least at this time, is really, 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 really very important that they have this understanding of what the cost is going to be. That it's not going to be easy. You're not going to maybe, realize the benefits that pastors have had in the past. You're really going to have to be out there and so committed to Jesus that you're willing to count the cost. You're willing to suffer and to be humiliated, but also to be blessed and to have as your highest joy following Jesus, and your greatest desire to have Jesus say, "Well done," and to be of that kind of dedication and service. And not simply to God, but to the people in the country, in the neighborhood, in the community, but also ultimately to the world. As Hitler's um, you know conquest grew and grew and grew. So, okay, okay. Compliment starts in 2 minutes, so we're going to have to end there. So, thank you all for your questions and comments. When we get together next week, we will. Uh, start with the section on 97 called truthfulness. And we'll probably get through truthfulness and into a bit of retribution that then goes through to page 107. So we'll start on 97 next week. So if you haven't already, read through really the next 10 pages, 97 through the top of 107. And we'll do the best we can to get through some of that. So thank you. Compliment now begins in 1 minute. Do have a good night. And if you're here for compliment, welcome. And we will begin our prayer together shortly. God bless everyone.